Hello again. One of the people who comments on here regularly complained on somebody's Facebook page that I have a lot of old books on the bookshelf behind me. He is, of course, right. Here's one of those books. It's certainly old. It was published in 1963, almost 60 years ago. For those who don't know, James Baldwin was one of the greatest American novelists of the 20th century. He's right up there with William Faulkner and Scott Fitzgerald. He also happens to be one of my own favourite authors. I've been moved today to consider how much things have changed for the worse in the literary world since James Baldwin was writing novels. I was prompted in this reflection by seeing that 2/3 of those shortlisted for the Booker Prize belong to visible minorities. I became a fan of Baldwin when I was a teenager in the 1960s. I found his writing absolutely extraordinary. What is really weird, though, is the fact that he was black, that it didn't really register on anybody in those days. It was irrelevant. He was judged, like any author, only by the quality of his writing. I didn't know when I first read Giovanni's Room that he was black, and if I had known it would have been no big deal. This was not just me, by the way. Here's a review of Giovanni's Room from the New York Times in 1956. Whoever has read James Baldwin's first novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, or his collection of essays and sketches, Notes of a Native Son, know him to be one of our gifted young writers. His most conspicuous gift is his ability to find words that astonish the reader with their boldness, even as they overwhelm him with their rightness. The reviewer goes on to compare James Baldwin to Proust. Much of the novel is laid in scenes of squalor with a background of characters as grotesque and repulsive as any that can be found in Proust's City of the Plain. But even as one is dismayed by Mr. Baldwin's materials, one rejoices in the skill with which he renders them. What's missing from this picture, children? Yes, that's right. There is no mention at all of the fact that this is a black author. It was in 1956 completely irrelevant. What's also worth noting is that the characters in Giovanni's Room are white. Imagine these days somebody writing a book which featured only characters of a different colour to them. It would be headline news. White people writing in black characters and vice versa is a hot topic at the moment. It's a hot topic because race has become such a big topic in a way that it never used to be. Books written by black people today all seem to centre around being black. James Baldwin had no time for such introspection. He dealt with themes of a more general interest. It would be impossible for a book reviewer in the New York Times today to fail to mention that an author being reviewed was black. This is partly, of course, because the book itself would be bound to be obsessed with race and identity as a black person. The Booker Prize shortlist has been drawn up not on merit but for political reasons, and this does not bode well. James Baldwin established his position by being one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, not by being nodded onto a shortlist because of the colour of his skin. My wife is also a fan of Baldwin, and because her copy of Go Tell It on the Mountain was dog-eared and tatty, I decided a few years ago to buy her a new one for her birthday. I was astonished to find that not a single book of James Baldwin's was apparently to be found in Foyles, the big London bookshop. I expected to find him in the section of classic literature, obviously. I mean, really, if he'd have lived a little longer, he probably would have got the Nobel Prize. When I asked the assistant and mentioned his name, she told me he'd probably be in the black section. So it proved. files had a little section for black writers, and there indeed was James Baldwin, along with some hideously mediocre and downright inferior authors, who also happened to be black. The only things he had in common with them was that he, like them, was black. In other words, he had, in the interest of liberal ideology, been placed in a ghetto. I found this profoundly depressing. I hoped for a time when writers will once again be valued solely for their talent, and that just as was once the case, book reviewers will not know or care what colour they are. It was so in 1956. Something has gone very wrong indeed that it is not the case today.